War does not determine who is right, only who is left. To be prepared for war is one of the most effective means of preserving peace. War is a defeat for humanity. The surest way to prevent war is not to fear it. But when will our leaders learn? War is not the answer. Great is the guilt of an unnecessary war. War is evil, but it is often the lesser evil. Man becomes his most creative during war. I cannot believe that war is the best solution. No one won the last war, and no one will win the next war. The tragedy of war is that it uses man's best to do man's worst. In war there is no prize for runner-up. War's not black and white, it's grey. If you don't fight in the grey area, you are going to lose. Strike against war, for without you no battles can be fought. I have never advocated war except as a means of peace. Our modern states are preparing for war without even knowing the future enemy. In war, you win or lose, live or die, and the difference is just an eyelash. A pint of sweat saves a gallon of blood. The most successful war seldom pays for its losses. Wars are not paid for in wartime, the bill comes later. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. I hate war as only a soldier who has lived it can, only as one who has seen its brutality, its futility, its stupidity. This is the nature of war, it turns us into enemies. People who have never met kill each other out of fear. If you want to make peace with your enemy, you have to work with your enemy. Then he becomes your partner. The only excuse for war is that we may live in peace unharmed. Until we end our own inner war, war will never end. As long as there are sovereign nations possessing great power, war is inevitable. War settles nothing. More than an end to war, we want an end to the beginnings of all wars. Peace is not only better than war, but infinitely more arduous. The first casualty when war comes is truth. War is never a solution, it is an aggravation. War is only a cowardly escape from the problems of peace. What is human warfare but just this, an effort to make the laws of God and nature take sides with one party? We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be, we shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds, we shall fight in the fields and in the streets, we shall fight in the hills, we shall never surrender. Once we have a war there is only one thing to do. It must be won, for defeat brings worse things than any that can ever happen in war. War is an ugly thing, but not the ugliest of things. The decayed and degraded state of moral and patriotic feeling which thinks that nothing is worth war is much worse. When the rich wage war, it's the poor who die. It is not only the living who are killed in war. The first and most imperative necessity in war is money, for money means everything else: men, guns, ammunition. Every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired, signifies in the final sense a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and are not clothed. War, a massacre of people who don't know each other for the profit of people who know each other but don't massacre each other. War is a series of catastrophes which result in victory. We are all tourists in history, and irony is what we win in wars. We must concentrate not merely on the negative expulsion of war but the positive affirmation of peace. It is my conviction that killing under the cloak of war is nothing but an act of murder. There is nothing that war has ever achieved that we could not better achieve without it. If they are going to have war, they ought to take the old men and leave the young to propagate the race. The great questions of the day will not be settled by means of speeches and majority decisions but by iron and blood. In peace, sons bury their fathers. In war, fathers bury their sons. If it's natural to kill, how come men have to go into training to learn how? I'm fed up to the ears with old men dreaming up wars for young men to die in. The state thrives on war, unless, of course, it is defeated and crushed, expands on it, glories in it. I refuse to accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war that the bright daybreak of peace and brotherhood can never become a reality. I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word. A war is a horrible thing, but it's also a unifier of countries. War is the greatest plague that can afflict humanity. It destroys religion, it destroys states, it destroys families. Any scourge is preferable to it. If we desire to avoid insult, we must be able to repel it. If we desire to secure peace, one of the most powerful instruments of our rising prosperity, it must be known that we are at all times ready for war. I don't oppose all wars. What I am opposed to is a dumb war. What I am opposed to is a rash war. Ours is a world of nuclear giants and ethical infants. We know more about war than we know about peace, more about killing than we know about living. The military don't start wars. Politicians start wars. War will exist until that distant day when the conscientious objector enjoys the same reputation and prestige that the warrior does today. War is cruelty. There is no use trying to reform it. The crueler it is, the sooner it will be over. Every soldier thinks something of the moral aspects of what he is doing. But all war is immoral, and if you let that bother you, you're not a good soldier. War is what happens when language fails. The true soldier fights not because he hates what is in front of him, but because he loves what is behind him. If I have learned anything in this long life of mine, it is this: in love we find out who we want to be, in war we find out who we are. The world is full enough of hurts and mischances without wars to multiply them. Wars are poor chisels for carving out peaceful tomorrows. War is always an adventure to those who've never seen it. It is well that war is so terrible, or we should grow too fond of it. Politics is war without blood, while war is politics with blood. In war, the strong make slaves of the weak, and in peace, the rich make slaves of the poor. It is easier to start a war than to end it. One of the main effects of war, after all, is that people are discouraged from being characters. There never was a good war, or a bad peace. War is a severe doctor, but it sometimes heals grievances. Listen up, there's no war that will end all wars. History more often records the brilliant successes and spectacular defeats of contending forces than the effect of war on the common people. Sometimes you have to pick the gun up to put the gun down. Only the dead have seen the end of war. One certain effect of war is to diminish freedom of expression. War is regarded as nothing but the continuation of state policy with other means.